Hi, we're here in the Hollywood Hills, home of filmmaking. We're launching something exciting from Panasonic, the S1H.
Panasonic's always taken the needs of filmmakers really seriously, from its GH range with the GH4 up to the 5 and 5S, right through now to the S range of full-frame mirrorless cameras. And the S1H is the camera designed specifically for filmmaking use. Yes, it's great for stills, but really it's aimed at filmmakers. Based on the recently launched S1 and S1R models, the S1H actually has a slightly different body and has got all the tools that filmmakers really want that frankly lots of rivals don't have. There's histogram, waveforms and vector scopes, big deal if you're a serious filmmaker. Peaking zebras, of course, you can put in LUTs, you can punch in a zoom, there's frame guides, frame markers, level gauge, audio levels, and a really important factor, the anamorphic D-squeeze. You get those blue streaks if there are really bright highlights, but also you get those lovely oval shaped out of focus background highlights too. It's a real unique bokeh and people just love it. Once you start shooting anamorphic, it really spoils you. You want everything to be shot anamorphic. Now, shooting anamorphic might seem out of the realm for your kind of independent filmmakers, and it probably is due to the cost of the lenses. $40,000, £40,000, that's the price of a full frame anamorphic lens, but for a one-off job to rent, then it really can make a huge difference. Yes, there are cheaper alternatives like the SLR Magic lens, but this is still a rental-only option for smaller guys. The beauty of this camera is it can take the really big, serious, anamorphic lenses that real filmmakers want to use to make films that look like they're made with a real big Hollywood budget. The headline figure everyone's really getting excited about is that this camera shoots 6K. Now, who really delivers anything in 6K? Not very many people. But actually being able to crop down to 4K makes sense. You can have three options in one if you shoot in HD. The 6K framing, down to 4K, down to HD. From one camera, one position, you can get three different shots. However, if you're shooting anamorphic, 6K really does make sense. When you de-squeeze the footage in your editing, then all that extra information really makes a big difference to the quality of the film. It's a real dream for filmmakers on a budget to be able to shoot like this. And for the high-end cinema guys, the reports are that the quality is absolutely amazing. Now, 6K is the headline figure, but for that, the camera shoots in a 3:2 format. The reality is most people will want to record in a 16:9 widescreen format, and for that, it drops to 5.9K, still at 200 megabits per second, and it'll shoot 420 10-bit long op internally with that. But one of the really nice figures is if you're shooting cinema 4K in 17:9 format at 25 frames a second, you get 400 megabits, 422 10-bit all intra. That's amazingly high quality. In normal 4K, yeah, 16:9, also at 400 megabits. But if you want to go to a higher frame rate, 4K at 50 or 60, then this drops to 200 megabits and is a 420 10-bit long op signal, but with a crop. If you're happy shooting in full HD, it opens up lots more frame rate options, including ridiculously fast 180 frames per second. And this doesn't come with the restrictions of the S1 and the S1R, which is automatic control. This opens up full manual control. So let's have a little look closer at some of the other really cool features of this camera. So the heart of this camera is its sensor, a 24 megapixel sensor, full frame, and essentially it's pretty much the same basic sensor as used in the S1. However, it's been completely redone. What that does, it gives it dual native ISO, as found on Panasonic's high-end Varicams. Now, Varicams are amazing at shooting in really low light, really high ISO, and this has brought that capability down to this camera, the S1H. So at low ISOs, the camera's base ISO is 640. However, once it starts to get darker and you crank the ISO up, there's a second base ISO of 4000, which uses a totally different circuit. This means at really high settings, The noise control is amazingly good, and at the lower settings you definitely get a little bit of a sharper image, but essentially it takes this camera onto a whole new level. We said the S1 was really good at controlling noise at high ISO. This one is even better. Now the camera we shot with, they were pre-production samples, so they haven't got the final firmware in. The image quality might not be exactly as the cameras that are going on sale very soon. However, it's really easy to see that at high ISOs, and we shot in lots of low light conditions, the control of noise is just incredible. And just like the Varicam, this sensor also comes with V-Log and V-Gamut. Not a light version of it as found in some of the other cameras, but the real deal, the stuff that matches exactly with the Varicam. So if you're using this as a B camera on a Varicam shoot, then you can seamlessly mix between the two. Of course, lenses will make a little bit of difference, but actually you're really, really close. The log shot on the GH5 and GH5S is V-Log L, which is a slightly different flavour. But the S1H has got real V-Log, gives more than 14 stops of dynamic range, say Panasonic, and a really wide colour space, wider than BT 2020 for full HDR and hyperlog gamma recording. And there's monitor assistance, so you can really see what you're going to get while you're shooting it. So with 6K recording, 422 10-bit that can be output to an external recorder, really nice colour tones, just like the Varicams, then this camera really oozes quality. The footage looks amazing. Yes, it's a pre-production, but any production changes should hopefully make it better. Now, if you're a fan of fast frame rates for shooting slow motion, then yes, you can shoot 50 and 60p in 4K, but if you want something really quick, you need to go to HD. Now, in HD, there are two different fast frame rate modes, VFR and HFR. So VFR is a variable frame rate option. This allows you to actually set the frame rate right the way up to 180 frames per second. With this, there's no audio and the autofocus system doesn't work. There is a different way, high frame rate recording. You can get up to 48 frames in Cinema 4K and 120 frames in Full HD. But in both these cases, audio is recorded and the autofocus system works. So you can slow down the footage in post or speed it up, do exactly what you like with it. If you do want to go up to the 180 frame rate, yes, you can control aperture, shutter speed or shutter angle. The camera lets you set shutter angle, proving what a real filmmaker's camera it is. Now in use, the body itself is really rugged. It really feels, it's pretty heavy, it's not a small camera, it really feels like you've got something of quality in your hands. It looks just like the S1 and the S1R, except for that nice big red recording button on the top, but it is a different body. Now, using a slightly wider body has enabled Panasonic to do something that's really cool with this camera. Lots of full frame mirrorless cameras have always struggled with heat, which has meant there have been time restrictions put on your shooting. Panasonic didn't want any time restrictions with shooting. So what they did, they redesigned the body, they put a completely silent fan inside it and some cooling vents at the back. Somehow they managed to still retain its weatherproofing features like the S1 and S1R, but this means you can keep shooting without any restriction. Now there are twin SD card slots and the battery's a really big unit. We shot for up to 2 hours without any problems. Also, you can take in power from a USB-C power bank, so you really can keep shooting all day. The new body has also allowed Panasonic to fit a completely different rear screen. This all tilts out but also flips round. So yeah, you can make it a really cool selfie camera if you want, but it means you can shoot from lots of different angles. There's a full-size HDMI port and the screen actually tilts away from this port. So instead of knocking into the cable, it doesn't do that at all. There's a big 1.8-inch LCD screen on the top plate to give you all the shooting information you need. If you use the viewfinder, then it's really, really good. It's really bright, it's bigger than anybody else's, and it has 5.76 million dots. The standard magnification is 0.78, but you can switch it to 0.7 or 0.74. When it comes to lenses, no, there aren't as many proprietary L-mount lenses on the market yet, but these are just increasing all the time. Sigma's launched a full range of lenses to fit this camera. Panasonic's range is increasing all the time, and with the S1H they've also revealed the 28-70 f2.8 Pro lens, which will be a real big hit with so many people out there. There are already lots of Leica L-mount glass on the market, and of course various adapters are coming on the market all the time to allow you to fit Canon EF lenses, PL lenses and lots more. Manufacturers are also busy making cases and all the accessories that this camera will need too. So by the time this camera is on sale, there should already be kits hitting the market soon to allow you to build it into a fully rigged up camera. Of course, don't forget that it's also great for stills. It has the same spec as the S1. In other words, it's really, really good, especially at low light. However, the camera does have an optical low pass filter, but the S1 doesn't. This means you might sacrifice a little bit of ultimate image quality, but it means there's less moire patterning. And in a camera specifically aimed at video, that really makes sense. Out here in LA, we met some filmmakers who've been making some great work with this camera already. They're praising its colour science, they're praising its usability, and we also spoke to one of the best known colorists in Hollywood who took a look at some of the footage from this camera and was really impressed. And you can hear what he says right here.
I'm really surprised about the quality of it. You know, the material was shot on a very high ISO, something like 1200, but it looked extremely clean for that. You know, it had absolutely no noise, which is very interesting, you know, for a camera like that. Even though the material I was working with is a relatively compressed H.265, you know, which is what was in the camera, it just looked actually with no artifacts. This was kind of my also second big surprise. Now, the material I worked with was shot with an anamorphic lens, and that in combination with a large format sensor gave such a beautiful filmic results, and it just had this great cinematic quality. And you know, and it is very rare actually to kind of get that out of such a small body. You know, we're used to seeing images like that coming out of big cinematic cameras. So this is definitely going to become, I think, camera that we will use as a second camera on big projects where we can't really get a bigger, you know, large format sensor camera on like a locations where we need to film or mount, or, you know, like I think it's definitely going to become, you know, that, you know, the B camera of the choice for any of the large sensor format projects. You know, I would love to learn and understand, you know, what does it take to make a sensor to be as clean as that, you know, and I kind of doubt that it's about the quality of the sensor. There must be some processing happening, because it's just, you know, there is very little or almost no perceivable noise, you know, on the very dark scenes. And you know, this movie was a little grungy, kind of dark movie with kind of dark interior shots and exterior night shots. And you know, it just looked actually better and cleaner than, you know, cameras, you know, that we are normally working with that cost like, you know, probably, you know, 10 or 20 times as much as that one.
We also talked to some professional filmmakers who've used the camera, and this is what one of them had to say.
We are filming a project called In Hope of Nothing. And it's a project about two brothers. The story is ultimately, it's my first fiction feature or short. I don't know where it lives in the time span at the moment, but it's my first fiction narrative that we're doing. And it's really about two brothers who tried to make a space odyssey film a few years back, and it crashed and burned. To me, it's all about collaboration. Like, when I started out, I was a very selfish filmmaker. I thought I could do everything. And I soon realized that it is about collaboration. It's the sum of many parts. That you can't just have a good camera and go and shoot. You need a good script, you need a good art director, you need a good gaffer, you need good lighting. Absolutely everything that you put into there is you're creating this world that everything works together, and it's a story world. And I think the most important thing is, at least with this S1H kind of camera that we've been working with, is that what I've realized through this process is that this is part of this world. It is a complementary, it complements our vision and everything we do within that space. It wasn't, I didn't feel that at any time was there any sacrifice to the quality or anything that we're doing. It really was, it complemented the entire process, and it was great working with it as well. When I started out in the industry, I used to edit movies in iMovie, right? And I didn't really know what I was doing, but to me, directing and film is all a feeling. So you're trying to create this feeling within the space and this aesthetic within the space. And I used to bring those, like I used to just put black bars, top and bottom, of normal spherical kind of lenses. And I used to crop the image in, and then I used to put loads of like grain in there and these horrible like sci-fi flares in that space. And what I was actually trying to channel, which I didn't realize, was anamorphic, because everything that I'd seen as a youngster was anamorphic, these beautiful film. And so I was really excited about using the S1H at this time, and the fact that it can use anamorphic lenses, but also it can use old school anamorphic lenses, so you can bring a really old school vintage aesthetic to what you're trying to do. The real romance of cinema and film. What I found amazing about this camera is that it wasn't just about using modern anamorphic lenses. You could go back to old school lenses, and we use Cinevision lenses, which are like 1970s, 1980s Japanese lenses. And the beauty about those is they have the sense of character. They almost have this organic softness that when light flares into it, it like almost just bleeds off and fills the frame. And it just has something rich and real to it, which I really loved about it. And as soon as I saw that look, I was like, that's exactly it. And I think
So with this camera, Panasonic really has changed the game as far as full-frame mirrorless cameras go, specifically aimed at filmmakers. It's got all the tools, it's got incredible resolution, there are no recording limits, it shoots anamorphic, it's affordable, it's solid, it can go shooting for ages. It's really, really good. If you're in the market for a full-frame mirrorless camera specifically for filmmaking, then Panasonic should be right up there at the very top. Of course, there may be new cameras coming out soon to rival this, but right now, this really is the king of the heap.
I think there are a number of target audiences for the S1H. I think primarily cinematographers, DOPs, and those guys who are probably shooting anamorphic for their main project, but need a small B or C camera to get into the small places, but need to keep that anamorphic look. I think those guys will really benefit from the anamorphic functionality that's in the S1H. In addition to that, you're going to have sort of other filmmakers who are not shooting anamorphic, who are shooting sort of indie commercial films, the sort of film that goes into the film festival circuit. I think hopefully those people will be really, really impressed by the specs on the S1H. And also from a personal feeling, actually, when I read the internet and watch the things that are being mentioned, I think the wedding market is actually quite a unique market for this. So that person who's going to be shooting both video and stills, stills from a low light environment in the church. This camera's got dual native ISO. So I think that'll be a really interesting target market for the S1H too. A lot of people are saying the benefit of 6K is so they can get better 4K. That's a really interesting piece of feedback. That was also something that the development team got feedback from the market on, so it's really good that feedback's remained consistent. Other areas, everybody's really loving that anamorphic. It's such a trend to have that anamorphic look. And the cameras that have been set up out here have all had, majority have had anamorphic lenses on, so it's just really, really, really nice look, and everybody likes that. But when you look online and look at the footage, lots of people are using adapters and different lenses. We heard a story yesterday of somebody using a kip-on adapter on an S1 with a Russian lens. So I think the benefit of the L mount and the openness of the L mount is you could use EF adapter for some Sigma lens, or you can use a PL adapter. And we heard a story yesterday from a New York filmmaker, a New York DOP who'd been using some Leica lenses by using that PL adapter. So we think actually the openness of the mount and the variety of adapters that are available is going to be a real strong selling point for the S1H. The price in the UK is $3,599, that's including VAT. Hopefully the launch of this camera can help people understand the range better now that we have the S1H, the S1R and the S1.
If you're really serious about changing systems, take a really good look at the Panasonic S1H. It's an amazing camera for filmmakers, it's got great stills ability, it's a solid bit of kit that should last for ages, and it does things other cameras just don't do at the moment.